Now, with the Russia-Ukraine conflict continuing and lockdowns in several Chinese cities owing to COVID concerns there, we aim to look at what this has meant for global supply chains. There have been, so many reports that we read about port congestion, massive port congestion in China, containers being stranded across ports. Not just in and around China, but even in Northern Europe, etc. as well, because of what is happening in Russia, Ukraine. To get a better sense of all of this on the ground, we have, or actually on the seas, we have Sunil K. Vaswani, Executive Director at Container Shipping Lines Association, and V.S. Parthasarathy, Vice Chairman at Allcargo Group. Gentlemen, great to have both of you here. Thank you very much for your time. Mr. Parthasarathy, if you can put things into context for us, what is the level of congestion? Where is the maximum congestion? And we've also been hearing, along with all this congestion, that freight rates actually are going down. So how does that square with congestion which has not gone down? Go on, sir. Mr. Parthasarathy, I think you are on mute. You'll have to unmute, sir.
Yes. Okay. Sorry about that. And thank you for having us on the show. The question is one of what is happening in China and how is it impacting. Lockdowns in China broadly are adversely impacting the congestion outside the ports of that country. It is there in Shenzhen, Xinjiang, Shanghai, Jilin, Suzhou, Jiangsu, and Beijing. These are disrupting the container movements at these ports. Your next question was, which are most affected? Shenzhen and Hong Kong are key container shipping hubs for global supply chain. And while the port delays are still continuing, these lockdowns have aggravated supply chain congestion and has various impacts. Okay. If you ask what kind of level it went, so if February was X, right now that could have been about, the congestion could have gone up by 2x. So the number of ships waiting to load and unload is gone up almost double. So that's the kind of impact happened. Another way to look at is that about 20% of the world's roughly 9,000 active container ships are now stuck in traffic jams outside congested ports. Okay, and this 30% of that backlog alone is in China. So you can see the kind of impact it has. But I hope that the guidelines which China has given to normalize industrial production and logistics flows and minimize the impact of it will have a meaningful impact in this situation, and it will ease. But as of now, there are still things to be done for ease to be done. Then your next question was on freight. This normally should push up freight rates, but then you are also looking at the global freight rates, and some of them has a normal ebb and flow, and that would also have an impact. So the net impact on this congestion alone, the impact should be of making the freight rates higher, but there are other flows which are happening which could do it the other way around. Back to you, sir.
Sure. Thanks a lot for that. Mr. Vaswani is also with us. Mr. Vaswani, your thoughts on what's happening? How much has the delay gone up by in terms of a timeline? What are the inventory levels? How much of the products are stuck still because of the container issues? If you can just give us some numbers.
Sure. Let me explain a little bit more. You asked a question about the freight rates also stabilizing or going down a bit. This is essentially because the shipping lines have taken steps to improve the situation. And during the whole of 2021, we repositioned 1.85 million TEUs of empty containers into the country. We also started new services, to the tune of 33,000 TEUs every week, which again works out about 1.80 million TEUs annually. So with all this happening, we've helped to stabilize the market, and hence the freight rates are stabilizing. Now, as far as the situation in Shanghai or China is concerned, as Mr. Parthasarathy rightly mentioned, the situation is pretty grave. And the operations in Shanghai are extremely slow due to the labor and trailer shortages out there due to the strict COVID protocols. In fact, there is no space, particularly for cargoes, for perishables, for instance. because all the plug points are all already utilized. Also, dangerous and hazardous cargo, there's no space for that because that requires dedicated space. So the ports remain, the terminals remain heavily congested. Even some of the other ports like Ningbo, for instance, are pretty bad. And in Shanghai, the waiting time is about a week. So what's happening is that many of the vessels are just skipping the port and just bypassing the port. And this is impacting cargo flows from China into several parts of the world, including India. Imports into India now are getting delayed by about 2 to 3 weeks. But all this, I mean, it's not just doomsday. I mean, there's also the positive side to it. The positive side to it is that with exports from China getting impacted, there is more space on vessels from India. So particularly to the US West Coast and to Latin America West Coast. So that gives greater opportunity for the Indian trade. So in fact, that is good. Also, the other global part of it is that you mentioned, we are talking about currently the Ukraine-Russia conflict. And the Ukraine-Russia conflict, as far as the shipping lines are concerned, we've been doing everything to help the trade. Unfortunately, the sanctions are there, so we cannot call at Russian ports. But we've been discussing with the shippers and the consignees and discharging cargo at alternative ports as per the mutual convenience, some of them being Gdansk, Gdynia, Rotterdam, etc. And hence, I think we are doing all that we can to help the situation. So currently, it's the situation is grave, but as I said, there are also positive sides to it. And with the efforts being made by China to help the situation, hopefully the situation would improve sooner rather than later. Thank you.
So, Mr. Vaswani, you said 2 to 3 weeks delay of imports from China, containers coming from China to Indian ports, right? That's across the board. And is that how does that compare to what we've seen over the last, say, 2 years or so? I mean, is it the worst we've seen? Has it been much worse earlier? Just for some perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, let me put it this way. It's not across the board. It's not because of the heavy congestion. We are in Shenzhen and now we are in Shanghai. And as a result of that, because of the backlog, with some of the vessels, we have that kind of delays. But, some of the other vessels, depending on the on how the vessels go about the port rotation, it would not be uniform to all the vessels, but it can go up to that level. Thank you. And you asked, was it the same as it was earlier? When the lockdown started, everything was completely in a mess. So we've come a long way. We've put in our vessels in shape. We've done added more ships. Port rotations have been taken care of. So I think we're in a definitely better situation. And this is also a temporary measure which we are handling pretty effectively as best as we can.
But I just wanted to understand one final word, Mr. Parthasarathy, from your end on how much costs have gone up, compared to, say, what it was last year, because this is a grave situation, right? If there's a 1 week delay, there's complete congestion at the ports in China. So how much have costs gone up now, and what is the expectation over the next couple of weeks?
So just to step back a little bit, Sonia, so on the Ukraine-Russia conflict, that's also adding to this situation, and growth overall is also getting impacted, as what WTO has pointed out. So you got to overlay what is happening in China with also this conflict, and the WTO also expects the volume growth at 3% in 22, down from the earlier close to 5%, 4.7%, I think, and brought down the next year. So there is certain amount of impact. The costs are threefold. First is when there is delay, there is a carrying cost which anyway gets loaded on the entire ecosystem, and somebody has to pay for it. Then also the cost of getting it faster. If you want it faster, then how does one manage that? And the third bit is in terms of the entire, this whole thing, congestion itself pushes up the rates, makes it, say, better for Indian vessels to go to US, as Vaswani pointed out. So there are many pulls and pushes, and then there is a global change. So there will be an impact upwards on price because of this conflict. There's no question. But is it cushioned because we have come a long way from the messiness of a couple of years back when the lockdown or the entire pandemic started, and now we are in a much better place and things have eased off. So that will cushion some of the hit which comes in, but overall, this will be slightly cost increasing as far as the industries are concerned.
All right, we will leave it at that. Gentlemen, thanks a lot for joining us. This has opened our eyes to how grave the situation is at the moment in China. There are delays, there is congestion at the ports, and this could mean higher costs for sure across industries. Let's slip into a short break. Up next, we'll connect with Pradeep.